So last weekend, I spent the entire weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, working at a convention and doing some teaching and some workshop stuff. And I didn't have a lot of time to sort of look at the news or really keep up with what was going on in the world around me just because I was either busy or I was sleeping. So the flight back really was an interesting flight back for me, because I got to sort of catch up on some of the various things that happened in our country, primarily things like what went down in Charlottesville and some of the other things. And the more I was going through my social media accounts, the more I saw people arguing and disagreeing and name calling and backbiting and all of those other things. So instead of spending this video talking about my week or showing things about my weekend, I thought we would talk about how to win an argument on social media. It sort of goes along with the actual teaching that I was doing in Nashville, because what I was teaching on was building a positive company culture. And I think a positive company culture really relates to your network, because even if you're not a CEO, you're not an entrepreneur, you still have people that are in your care. You're still responsible for relationships. And there's still some building of a culture that you have to do inside of your circle. And so if you'd like to see more of that particular teaching or that particular workshop, I'll put a link in the show notes to the audio from that workshop so you can check that out. But otherwise, let's get into how to win an argument on social media. You can't handle the truth. So if you really want to be able to even start a conversation or start a discourse, particularly on social media, but this also applies in person, you have to ask yourself some questions first. And I think even though this is going to seem basic and elementary, the truth of the matter is we don't always do this. And I don't always do this either. But we should ask ourselves 3 questions. Number 1, what do I think? Number 2, why do I think that? And number 3, what evidence do I have? And although, like I said, those are really, really simple questions to ask ourselves, the truth is we don't always do that. We don't ask ourselves exactly what we think, why we think it, and if we have any evidence at all. Because the truth is that there's some things that we believe that we only believe them because that's our experience. And other people who grew up in other places or in other circumstances have a different experience, and that doesn't make the way they believe or the way they think about a particular thing wrong. It just makes it different. The other part of that is just knowing that you and I don't have it all figured out. Like, there's still some things that I don't know, and the tough thing about not knowing is that I don't know what I don't know. And so anytime that I'm going to start a discourse or add to a conversation, there has to be a level of curiosity, because there's oftentimes some really valuable information we can get that can do one of 2 things: either start to change our mind about something we think or we thought was true, or it can help us to have even more evidence for why we believe what we actually believe. But we have to start with the humility and the curiosity that says, boy, I don't have everything figured out, and perhaps I'm missing a little something here. So instead of jumping to conclusions or jumping to judgment, we should be starting with a level of just genuine curiosity. The second thing is just posting with an intent to understand and not to judge. Because I don't know about you, but I can't name or think of one person who's ever had their mind changed because of someone else's Facebook rant. Like, no one voted for a particular presidential candidate during the election because of someone else's hateful or ranty post about the other candidate. Most people already had their minds made up. Or most people already had their worldview, and a random Facebook post doesn't change that. So when it comes to the toughest conversations, we should really be using social media as a gateway to a real conversation, to a real human connection. Because after all, that's what social media should be in the first place. It should be a gateway for us to experience a human connection with someone else, a real live human connection, not a back and forth, not a tit versus tat, not a rant versus rant, but a real human connection. And if you post with a hope and with a desire to understand, using curiosity, taking your belief through that filter, what is it I believe? Why do I believe it? And what evidence do I have? Then you can have a hope to have a real discourse and get to the next phase of this process. The third thing you need to know about winning an argument on social media every single time is that you have to give evidence with every belief every time. What I mean by that is if you're going to say something that you believe or make a statement, it should go like this: I believe this to be true. The evidence that I have is this, and that evidence can be study, it can be experience, it can be something that someone else has told you, it can be a myriad of things, but it has to be evidence. And then you follow up by saying, that's why I believe that. That way you're just sharing what you believe, and you're not pounding someone over the head and trying to convince them or to make them wrong, and that keeps you from ever name calling. So if you always use that formula by saying, here's what I believe, here's the evidence that I have, and that's why I have that particular belief, people are much more likely to respect what you're saying. And if they don't, you know that they're not using the same filters that you are, and that's okay, and you should mitigate that conversation. If you use this formula every single time, and you follow up every belief with evidence, and then solidify it by letting it be your belief and not trying to push it on other people or trying to make other people wrong or trying to beat them into submission. You know, one of the things one of the quotes that I really love is this. It says, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." What that means is if you win an argument, you've still lost because you haven't really changed the other person's mind. The only thing you've done is you've created ill will between you and that person, and they will hate you for the fact that you've dominated them in an argument. The best thing that you can do is share what you believe, why you believe it, and then allow them to come up with their own ideas and their own understanding. Because the truth is that we can't change what people believe. We can only be a demonstration of what we believe and then let other people make their own choices and formulate their own beliefs. And oftentimes when we're arguing, the only thing we're doing is we're helping them cling tighter to the belief that they have instead of really sharing with them what we believe, why we believe it, and then the evidence we have for our belief. And that's why in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, he says that the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Avoid it the same way that you would earthquakes and rattlesnakes. Because the truth is that arguments are worthless. Arguments don't change people's minds. Arguments pulls people further and further apart. So before you start to argue with someone on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter or any other social network that you find yourself or feel compelled to make someone feel wrong or convince or show someone how they're wrong, consider this. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to have a relationship? Being right feels good, but having a relationship allows you to have an impact.